The House pursues impeachment. Braun endorses and gets endorsed, plus a new head of the Indiana Chamber, and more. From the television studios at WFYI, it's Indiana Week in Review for the week ending September 15th, 2023.
Indiana Week in Review is made possible by the supporters of Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations.
This week, U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy announced the House will initiate an impeachment inquiry against President Joe Biden. The Republicans have yet to uncover any wrongdoing by the Democrat. Some of the more conservative members of the GOP caucus had been pushing for impeachment since before Biden was sworn in more than 2 years ago. McCarthy had so far resisted those calls, but now alleges Biden lied about his personal knowledge of his family's foreign business dealings. House committees have investigated Biden's son Hunter for months, but have not uncovered any direct financial connection between Hunter's business dealings and the president. Despite McCarthy's move, some on the far right are still arguing potential impeachment isn't moving fast enough, with Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz even threatening to make a move to oust McCarthy from the speakership. Even if impeached, it's extremely unlikely Biden will be removed from office. Doing so would require 2/3 of the Senate to convict him, a chamber controlled by Democrats. How does McCarthy's impeachment move impact the president and House Republicans? It's the first question for our Indiana Week in Review panel. Democrat Ann Delaney, Republican Chris Mitchum, John Schwannis, host of Indiana Lawmakers, and Nikki Kelly, editor-in-chief of the Indiana Capitol Chronicle. I'm Indiana Public Broadcasting State House Bureau Chief Brandon Smith. Ann Delaney, ultimately, do you think Joe Biden will be impeached by the House?
No.
Really?
And I don't think even Kevin McCarthy thinks that either, because he would have put it to a vote, which is what he said he was going to do in the first place. I mean, if you needed any more evidence that the Republican Party in Washington, and maybe even in Indiana, is controlled by their right-wing nuts, this is it. You've got the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the Jim Jordans and the Jim Banks controlling what the agenda is for Congress. They don't like the fact that Joe Biden is president. They don't want to admit that Donald Trump lost the election. So what they do is anything they can do, and they can push McCarthy to do this so that he looks like there'll be an actual impeachment inquiry, but there's nothing that Joe Biden did that was wrong. So ultimately, it's going to fail. But in the meanwhile, it's going to put moderate Republicans in a very bad position electorally going into next year's election. So I think this is going to backfire.
Kevin McCarthy seems like he's between a rock and a hard place here.
Correct.
He's got moderate Republicans that he needs to worry about, although I suppose they can do whatever they're going to do if it comes to a vote on the House floor. But then he's got his far-right flank who still aren't happy. Like, even after he made this announcement, are still threatening him. What is Kevin McCarthy to do here?
Yeah, you can almost say he's stuck between like an impeachment and a hard place, just because you had this from the far right wanting him to go through with this inquiry, but also you're looking at a potential government shutdown coming along, and also that wing of the party wanting him to really cut a lot of drastic spending that he's kind of already agreed to with the president. So I think he had to choose one of these to kind of try to keep the other side at bay. But I really don't think the situation helps anybody, because I remember when impeachments used to mean something, and then obviously the Democrats started in 2016 with very little information, because now, according to them, the standard, and of course Republicans are adopting it now, but the standard is no longer you violated a statute and you're a criminal and you should be prosecuted. It's now our party did something that, or you did something that our party doesn't like, and now we're going to use the impeachment in order to basically open up more investigations and use it as political fodder in future ones. Democrats started in 2016.
Well,
and
we don't know yet that Donald Trump is
but
the criminal.
But the impeachment had nothing to do with that.
Not the first one. That's right.
In terms of how this impacts Joe Biden, the impeachments plural of Donald Trump didn't seem to affect Donald Trump very much. He lost the election. I'm not sure the impeachments really played one way or the other into that loss. How does this affect Joe Biden as he looks ahead to 2024? And there's, quite frankly, a lot of question marks about his re-electability, although, again, I don't think necessarily related to this impeachment inquiry.
Well, it became clear this week that the Biden campaign and the White House had been planning on this as a fait accompli for months. They already were, this was hardly a surprise. And so their strategy, in simple terms, is, dismiss sort of as if it's a joke, or compartmentalize and try to keep the focus on the message that the administration, frankly, has had trouble conveying, that if you look at the data, I know that bread and milk are still expensive, gas still is more than we want to pay, but the economy is, by traditional measures that economists look at, pretty healthy, pretty resilient. To the extent that he can not focus on the message of helping average Hoosiers and average Americans because of this being a distraction, then that hurts him. But if he can, in fact, compartmentalize, if he can, in fact, treat it as sort of just a sideshow, and I do think Republicans run a risk here, too, not only for the reason mentioned about the moderates, but if Republicans are seen as focusing all of their time and attention on this, which may or may not, I mean, we've seen no evidence yet, and a lot of committees have looked at this. The 3 committees that are charged to do this inquiry were already investigating beforehand.
Yeah, there's nothing really
and there's
new
been
happening
nothing
here
new, no new evidence.
Yeah.
So if Republicans are seen as just not keeping their eye on the economic ball and what voters ostensibly sent them there to do, then it could have some backlash for Republicans.
It does feel like if there's a wild card to this, differentiating it from the 2 impeachments of Donald Trump, those impeachments of Donald Trump were just straight up about Donald Trump. Republicans are trying to tie Hunter Biden, who, I mean, there's smoke, there's fire, there's a lot going on with him.
Sure. There's a lot of indirect evidence
there. It would strongly appear as if he probably broke the law, at least in some way.
Yeah, I mean,
but that's completely different from Joe Biden actually having
frankly,
done anything wrong.
I mean, it's not even indirect evidence against Hunter Biden now. I mean, obviously he's been indicted on multiple charges. They're moving forward with that, but that's not, what they want. They want the president, and so, I kind of wonder if this is going to do the same thing that we've seen on Trump's side, which is really just gin the base up. Every time Trump gets indicted, his polling numbers go up. Maybe the same thing will happen for Biden.
I think it's also important on the Hunter Biden thing. Did he do things that he shouldn't have been doing? Absolutely. But the latest one, checking the wrong box to get a gun when Republicans want to issue them at birth and then handing it back in 11 days, does not seem like the kind of conduct that our Department of Justice.
It's a broken law,
It's a law.
It's a broken law, and
I don't
it would
think the
not be
president broke it.
prosecuted for anybody except for the
Well, that's
president's
for those
son.
who say that he's getting special treatment. He is,
He
but it's
is,
not
but
the
it's-
kind of,
yeah,
he's
exactly.
being treated more harshly.
I think Joe Biden is absolutely going to get impeached just because Kevin McCarthy cannot write a check that can't be cashed. How bad would it look if you come out and say, we're going to impeach this president, and then you have to backtrack and say, well, actually,
Well,
we don't
back-
have the
I don't
votes.
think back-
Because then it looks
I
like
don't
an
think
exoneration.
backtrack-
I don't know if he has the
You've gotta have
votes.
the votes.
It's gonna be
Backtracking
really
is not an
close.
If he
issue for
has
him.
the
12
votes,
days
then
ago,
why
he
didn't
said
he call for an
was gonna-
impeachment
Yeah.
vote?
Yeah.
Nancy
Yeah.
Pelosi did the same thing under Trump. She
Right,
called
but
for it
she
first
had-
before
But
she
She
did
had
the
the
votes.
votes.
She had the votes.
And
Yeah, but
he
she
said
still waited a while. She
literally
would have done
two
it
She
right
didn't
away.
want to
She
do
didn't
it,
have to
but he
backtrack
doesn't
from
have the
anything.
votes.
But a non-impeachment looks like an exoneration, and I
Well,
hope
that's
that he
good.
has his checks marked.
I want you
to
to
not do
verify
that.
that when he doesn't get impeached,
right.
that he's been exonerated.
Time now for viewer feedback. Each week we pose an unscientific online poll question. This week's question is, does President Biden deserve to be impeached? A, yes, or B, no. Last week we asked you whether a Democratic candidate can win the 2024 race for Indiana governor. 65% of you say yes, 35% say no. If you'd like to take part in the poll, go to WFYI.org/IWIR and look for the poll. Well, U.S. Senator Mike Braun picked up a major endorsement for his campaign for governor this week and made an endorsement of his own, backing Congressman Jim Banks to replace him in the Senate. Club for Growth, a national conservative advocacy organization, announced it is endorsing Braun in the crowded Republican primary for Indiana's open governor's seat. The group's president, David McIntosh, a former Indiana congressman who ran an unsuccessful campaign for governor in 2000, called Braun a proven conservative fighter. Club for Growth previously backed Braun in his 2018 U.S. Senate bid, and it has already been in play in Indiana politics this year, running an attack ad against former Governor Mitch Daniels as he mulled a potential Senate bid against Congressman Jim Banks. Braun this week also announced he's endorsing Banks for the U.S. Senate seat he's leaving open with his run for governor. Chris Mitchum, normally a Club for Growth endorsement is a big deal, particularly because it tends to come with a lot of money. But there is already so much money in this race. Does this endorsement lack some of the impact it might otherwise have had?
Maybe in the money sense, but I think in the messaging sense and the political activism sense, it does not. Because, I mean, even if you go to the Club for Growth website, one of their talking points is you don't want to be on the other side of one of our ads. And you saw it with Mitch Daniels. I'm not saying that's the reason why he didn't run, but this gives Mike Braun a lot of carte blanche to basically have Club for America and other organizations that they contribute to. I think they had over $60 million in total contributions in the last election cycle, and that wasn't even a presidential cycle. So who knows how large their coffers are going to be this time. But that gives him carte blanche to basically say, hey, they endorsed me, but I don't necessarily endorse this message. And you've seen them all on the different TV airways of kind of crazy commercials that, you know, a person running for office can kind of separate himself from just because he doesn't directly endorse it.
Is that the biggest impact? And also, I think Club for Growth does carry a certain amount of weight with I would think Republican primary voters. They you know, that's an organization they align
You've got the
with.
Republican primary voters and the establishment Republicans who this might carry some weight with split in this endeavor already.
Which I think is why it's kind of a bigger deal, right? Because like you combine that with like
it might coalesce
with Americans for
If you're running
Prosperity.
as an outsider, this works right into your message. You know, this is more of the same. If you want something different, if you want emphasis on economic growth and not on the social issues and not on the stuff that divides us, you don't go with him. I'm not sure it's all that. The money carries a lot of weight, but you've got so many heavy hitters here that can write checks of their own to counter that it's not going to have any impact except for the TV stations. Yeah.
I want to talk about the other endorsement, but not from the angle of what happened this week. I mean, right now, technically there is another Republican running for the U.S. Senate, John Rust. Not sure he can make the ballot legally at this point. So Jim Banks is certainly the assumed nominee. So I don't think Mike Braun's going to change that race. Does Jim Banks endorse in the governor's race?
If I were him, I wouldn't. I mean, he's now been endorsed by two of the members in the governor's race, Suzanne Crouch and Mike Braun. I think, I don't know. I think it's probably best just to stay out of it. But we know Jim Banks likes to take positions. I mean, he's not afraid to take positions.
Well, he likes to mix things up.
Yeah, he likes to mix things up. So maybe we'll see that in the coming future.
Would a Jim Banks endorsement in the governor's race have an impact?
Negative.
That's
I think.
Not in the Democratic primary, not in the Republican primary.
Well, maybe in the general election.
At the margins, you know, when you have a race that's so splintered, I guess I've said before, you know, leading in the money race is never a bad thing. Getting endorsements, 99% of the time, is never a bad thing. So, all things being equal, I'd rather have it than not have it.
Isn't this exactly the sort of race where something like that can make a difference? Right. Because if you're talking about 4 or 5 major candidates, percentage points
candidates, though. Endorsements matter when voters, primary voters, don't know who the people are. They know who these people are. And they've already lined up, I think, behind which one they're going to support.
Well, not yet, maybe not yet with some of them, because
maybe
there's still a couple candidates
maybe not,
trying to introduce themselves.
And endorsements can't either be a flash in the pan. You get us talking about it, or you get a headline or two in a given week. And then that doesn't do much, maybe. If the Club for Growth really is going to sustain it in terms of ground support, in terms of ongoing financial support, that's the kind of thing. More than raising a flag and saying, we like this person, we like that.
Which is not necessarily
it'll be very
what a
nice
Jim
to
Banks
see the
endorsement.
Club for
Right,
Growth.
because I don't think he's going to sit there and, you know, put his volunteers, dispatch his volunteers to go work for someone else.
Depends on how easy that.
Well, maybe.
You could argue if Suzanne Crouch or Eric Doden got this endorsement, it's probably a lot of bigger deal. I mean, you would think with Braun, with the federal connections, he's already endorsed by Americans for Prosperity.
It's more about who he's not endorsing than who he's endorsing.
Exactly. It would be a lot bigger story.
Suzanne Crouch already has
Got
2
ones.
congressional endorsements,
does?
so it's not like no Congress people.
I grant you that about the news as a departure from the norm. If Jennifer McCormick had gotten the endorsement, then it's
that would
news.
have
That would
been
be
a big deal.
Then it's
All right.
news.
The Indiana Chamber of Commerce named its new leader this week after longtime president and CEO Kevin Brinegar announced his retirement last year. Vanessa Green Sinders will step into the role beginning next month. Sinders has worked for 2 decades on policy in Washington, D.C. That includes leading the lobbying work of a hotel trade group and Charter Communications. She's only lived in Indiana for a year, moving here with her husband, a Hoosier native. And she says once she started networking, she found out about the chamber position.
I wanted my next professional move to be something that was more focused on my community, as most of my roles in DC were more nationally focused.
Sinders says her focus as she takes the helm will be on collaboration and acting on feedback.
I think the chamber has a real opportunity to take a leadership role in providing the resources and support to the state to make sure that our workforce is best positioned, that our businesses are best positioned.
Sinders is the first woman to be president and CEO of the Indiana Chamber. John Schweinis, considering her predecessor's track record, what are reasonable expectations for Sinders at the helm of the Indiana Chamber?
Big shoes to fill. Certainly Kevin Brinegar did a lot over 2 decades of leadership. He was a very steady force and a constant in that organization and worked hard. So she has a tough act to follow. I think what's tough for her is she inherits an organization that still is a huge heavyweight, a force in the State House, but it's more nuanced, I think, than it used to be. Used to be, what's good for General Motors is good for America, what's good for the Chamber is good for the Indiana General Assembly. And I think because of the change in the makeup of the Republican caucuses in the House and Senate, who aren't necessarily business is always right, we've seen, the schism come up where over employer rights on issues such as immunizations and vaccinations.
And smoking.
Guns,
smoking and guns. So it's not just, if it's good for business, because how many times now have we seen the Chamber and Cummins and Lilly and others, whether it's reproductive rights, whether it's choice of lifestyle, civil rights protections, hate crimes, all of those things. Yeah. It's not a slam dunk anymore. Yeah. So it's more nuanced, and it will be up to her to try to keep her caucus, if you want to call it, because that's not a monolithic entity either. That's the challenge. We used to think of things, I think, I'm guilty of this, as very much this side's over here, this side's over there.
Black and white.
And now everything is just much more nuanced.
I mean, the Chamber is still one of the most influential organizations at the State House, certainly. And while it'll be a new leader, it's not like she's bringing completely new people into the organization. The leadership team underneath her is all pretty steady, and there's been some transitions.
As far as we know, she might.
That's true.
That's true.
But there's been some transitions there, but they've all happened gradually. So, in terms of their advocacy at the State House, do you expect much to change, at least initially?
Probably not. I mean, they obviously have a system already to come up with their agenda items, and they use their, senior vice presidents in certain areas, education, taxation, things like that, to come up with that. So that'll probably generally be the same process. I found it very interesting because I've heard some of the names of people who applied for that job, and they're big hitters. And so I did find it interesting and impressive that they went with someone who does not have much Indiana history, only a year in the state. So she's going to have a lot of learning to do about personalities, about issues and context. But I think they'll still be, successful on sort of the core regulation, taxation kind of stuff. I'd be curious if she also wants to move further in some of the social sides that they've done in recent years.
Quality in place sort of things.
Right.
I think right.
The things that attract people to Indiana. Yeah.
To the point about she is relatively new to Indiana. Her husband obviously has a lot of roots here. He's lived here. He's a native Hoosier. And there's no question that her resume is, this is the sort of person who absolutely should lead a state chamber of commerce. But for the Indiana experience, there's not much there. What do you make of that decision by the Indiana Chamber?
Well, I think, they obviously were impressed by her resume, and I've heard some good things about her, although I don't even know her. So it seems to me there's a learning curve there, but she knows enough to know what she needs to learn, especially going into the session. So I'm not as concerned about that. I'm glad that they have a woman leading it, frankly, and I hope that she's moderate on the social issues and can keep pushing that agenda in the Indiana General Assembly, because it isn't only about taxation, and it's largely about education, but not exclusively. And we are going to lose young people and doctors and other professionals who are not going to want to run or live in a state that is backward in their approach to social issues.
In terms of the Indiana Chamber of Commerce, the folks who made this decision were the leadership committee, a search committee made up of folks at the top of the sort of organization. But the chamber is made up of members across the state that are, I think it was John who pointed out, incredibly diverse. What do you think membership thinks of someone who obviously has the resume, but has only been in Indiana for a year.
Yeah, obviously she was vetted, and to your point, she may not have a lot of Indiana experience, but I think she has a lot of experience in the lingo of advocacy. I know she ran her own consulting firm here in Indiana. She has experience on different congressional not campaigns, but different staffs in DC. So I think she definitely knows that lingo, and ultimately any association, I don't care who you are, only has a certain amount of political capital. And to John's point, whenever you start veering into those more social issues, just by proxy of how political capital works, you start losing influence on a lot of the other stuff that has to do with workforce development and taxes and things like that. So I think whenever you see these large employers start going more towards caring about more of those social issues, obviously they have a really big voice in the chamber. So I think it's going to be up to her to kind of have that balance of how much do we wade into that while still wanting to be like really impactful at the
And it's
same house.
interesting because she mentioned in the interview with me yesterday, the word collaboration came up multiple times from her. So I think that's something that
As long as the staff has prepared for her a guidebook on the pronunciation to Indiana cities, that's what trips as long as she's not talking about Carmel and
Just do not drop
Milan,
Indiana, whatever you do.
Yes, Indiana. Yeah, that's
Well, her husband's from Clay
Credibility
County,
is
so
zero.
nails on a chalkboard.
Brazel
at the
probably
State
won't be a
House.
problem.
All right. This week marks a solemn anniversary. It was 20 years ago that Indiana lost its governor. Frank O'Bannon, more than 7 years into his time as governor, passed away on September 13, 2003, after a stroke a few days earlier. The Corydon native had served 18 years in the state Senate and 8 years as lieutenant governor before winning 2 terms to the governor's office. His accomplishments in office included tax reform and property tax relief, as well as creating the first statewide community college system in the country, Ivy Tech. Nikki Kelly, you were covering Indiana politics at the time that this happened. What stands out from you around the immediacy of when he died?
Well, obviously, I remember every moment of that week before he died and how incredibly sad and stressful it was. But I try to instead think about, what it was like to cover him. One of the things we always used to notice, he carried a little point-and-shoot camera around, and he would just take pictures all over, no matter what. And that's one thing I remember about him. I also remember one time a press corps member whose dog died. He sent them a bereavement letter for the dog, Cedar. We were obviously covering him, and sometimes we didn't agree, and he didn't necessarily like the stories sometimes. But he was congenial, he was respectful, and that's what I'll try to remember over the sadness.
Yeah. John, your memories of Frank O'Bannon?
All very warm memories. I covered him for a long period of time. Well, back before when he wanted to be governor the first time around and was sort of edged aside by Evan Bayh and Ann Delaney and others. But he was a gentleman always. And he was, let me pay an ultimate compliment, he was a Hoosier, which is a good thing. I'm a native Hoosier. I don't have his many qualities and characteristics, but he was genuine. He was down home in a good way. He was kind, as Nikki alluded. And the other, there's a book out that's now just been released, The Last Politician. Now, this is a reference to Joe Biden, and it's a complimentary title. I would say, if the title hadn't already been stolen, you could say that in a way about Frank O'Bannon. And by that I mean, and it's a good thing, because I don't think politics is a dirty word. He's somebody who had been steeped in Indiana politics and the levers of government so long through his legislative service and so forth. He was about getting things done, and he knew how to get it done. And public service was his byword, and he knew how to get it done. So politics was not dirty. It was about serving Hoosiers, and he did it well.
Yes, 16 years, I think, in the state Senate, 8 years as lieutenant governor to Evan Bayh,
and then governor,
nearly 8 years
almost
as governor.
8 years, yeah. And the other thing, all of that is absolutely true. And the other thing is that he was held in very high regard by the Republicans. People liked him. He was genuine, which is different from a lot of the politicians we see today. He wasn't embarrassed about the fact that he was a public servant and he had done all these things. What he said is it gave him a better appreciation for how things worked and how to get things done, and he was right about that. The community college system by itself is a huge accomplishment, and he got it done.
Nikki, do you think Frank O'Bannon is, it's been a long time since obviously he served. Do you think is Ivy Tech the biggest lasting monument to Frank O'Bannon in Indiana, or do you think he still has an impact in this state otherwise?
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest one. There were some education improvements, K-12 education improvements made under him as well. But that's definitely, I think, the biggest one that is in his legacy.
And also the last Democrat to win a gubernatorial election
Exactly.
in the state.
Exactly. And look how far we've
Who
come
else has
since
had
then.
ukuleles at his inauguration, a ukulele performance?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he was just one of
He
a
was
kind.
just genuine.
He got along very well with the media. That was a particular specialty of his. And yeah, I guess that's had the foresight to be born and raised in Indiana's first capital. What more can a politician want? Now that's really planning things out.
Yeah.
You know?
There you go.
I did want to ask you that you talked about the relationship he had with the press. Is that something that's of a time gone by, or do you still see that in governors to this day?
Oh, I still see it some. Yeah, I mean, all governors, I think, disagree sometimes from time to time, but we generally treat each other fine. I think Frank O'Bannon maybe took it a little further. We would once a year, we would get invited to the State House, and he would give away little trinkets that he had gotten from people, and they were sort of jokey kind of things. And I have a USS O'Bannon hat from him that I still have in my office.
Don't forget, he was, to your question, he was a before he was a politician, he was a multi-generational newspaper owner.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
it was in the
Right.
blood.
Yeah.
That's Indiana Week in Review for this week. Our panel is Democrat Ann Delaney, Republican Chris Mitchum, John Schwannis of Indiana Lawmakers, and Nikki Kelly of the Indiana Capitol Chronicle. You can find Indiana Week in Review's podcast and episodes at wfyi.org/IWIR or on the PBS app. I'm Brandon Smith of Indiana Public Broadcasting. Join us next time, because a lot can happen in an Indiana week.
The opinions expressed are solely those of the panelists. Indiana Week in Review is a WFYI production in association with Indiana's public broadcasting stations.